Hello and welcome to another episode of the Growing Guelph podcast. Thanks for downloading. Today I'm speaking with Glynis Hamilton and Rayna Lew, a mother-daughter team leading the Montessori School of Wellington. We talk about what makes the Montessori education unique, how it's shaping young minds here in Guelph, and then the values that guide their work in our community. Let's get right to that conversation. Well, today I am joined by Glynis Hamilton and Rayna Lew of the Montessori School of Wellington. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today, both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah. So I think this will be an interesting discussion and a lot of me maybe understanding more of the Montessori school system and kind of getting your perspective on it, because I am interested in it, but I'm going to be a very outsider perspective in that I've gone through a school system, but I don't have any kids of my own yet. So I'm very much like, I went through it, but I have no idea how it works and like how the Montessori school differs from other ones. My roommate in university went to Montessori school, and I know that.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
So I'm kind of interested in the whole methodology in that. But why don't to kick things off, could both of you kind of introduce yourselves to our audience?
Sure.
Okay. Well, I'm the founder of the school, and I founded it in 1996, and then Rayna came on board when she was
2014.
still in high school,
Oh, okay, yeah.
and she helped out in our after-school program, and she basically grew up with the Montessori method embedded in her, because I had taken the training, and what year were you born?
92.
92, okay. So she was just the right age to start in our school once we opened it.
Mm-hmm.
And so she's grown up around the Montessori philosophy all her life. So she sort of graduated to an assistant in one of our programs, and then she took the Montessori course and got her diploma and started working at our old location, which was on Dublin Street United Church.
Mm-hmm.
We were there for 25
years.
25
Oh, wow.
years. And so she started there as a Montessori teacher. And then in 2020, we moved to a new location down in the south end of Guelph, on Samuel Drive, which is just off
Claire and Victoria.
Clare and
Yeah.
Victoria.
Okay.
Yeah. And it was a bit rough at the beginning. It was right in the middle of COVID.
Mm-hmm.
And we noticed a difference in the children, because we'd had 25 years experience of taking children at their first program.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a bit of a rough go at the beginning, but things are going really great now.
Yeah. Sorry to interrupt, but we were able to expand. So now we have a toddler program at our school, 2 toddler classes, and it had always been our dream to have our own building, so we didn't have to share space
Yeah.
or storage rooms.
Yes, we expanded.
Yeah. And so I guess for perspective, so Rayna, did you go to the Montessori school
Yes.
through your schooling as well?
Yes.
Okay.
So my mom was my teacher
Okay.
back in 96. I believe. Yeah, 96.
Yeah.
So I was in her first class of about 5. There were 5 other people in her class.
Okay.
And so I graduated from my mom's class, and then I went to grade 1 in a public school.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, given your birth year, I think I'm 1 year older than you. I was
Okay.
born in 91. So
Yes.
we have some shared perspective in terms of being part of the same cohort.
Yeah.
Age-wise, I was going to say public school. I went to the Catholic school board system. I
Okay,
grew up
yeah.
in Niagara. So I'm interested to kind of, as I will draw from my experience in the school system, sort of to compare and contrast. But Glynis, what was your like, do you have a teaching background? Is that how you, like, how did you come to the Montessori system
No,
to begin with?
I had my first child when I was close to 40. And I found once she got to about 2, 3 years of age, I wasn't enough for her anymore. She needed to be with other children the same age. So I started looking for care for her, and I had plans to go back to work. And I was very disheartened by what I saw in the general childcare field. And then I visited a beautiful Montessori school in Toronto, and it was just instantaneous. I knew this is what I wanted for her. And so she started in a Montessori school, and I decided to take the course basically to understand what my daughter was doing. There's a lot of terminology that isn't every day, and I just wanted to know what it was she was doing. And so I took the course, and at that time I had 3 children,
Yeah.
all under 5.
Oh, wow, that's a busy household.
Yes.
It was very busy.
Yeah.
And I had to commute to Toronto to take the course. But,
You were living in Guelph at the time?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So I graduated, and in my final year, I happened to meet a young woman who was moving back to Guelph. She'd been born here and moved to Toronto. She was moving back, and her goal was to open a Montessori school, and she was looking for a partner. So I became the partner, and the 2 of us started the school. And then she had her daughter in 2008, I think. And she continued working at the school, but then she decided she wanted to spend time at home with the daughter. So I took over, and I had done. We sort of shared the responsibility according to our talents, and she was a great schmoozer. So she did all the schmoozing.
What kind of schmoozing is required
With the
in
parents.
yeah, smoothing things over.
Yes.
Talking, like, yeah.
Yes.
Saying everything's okay, not to worry, that
Yeah.
kind of, yeah.
And I had an administrative background, so I did all the paperwork. So it wasn't any. I was used to doing it all. And I got another teacher who was a great schmoozer. So.
And you both were teaching at the same time.
Oh yes.
Yeah, so they were
Yes.
both the owner and also teaching.
Right.
At that time.
Well, so for any of our listeners who, like myself, maybe aren't familiar with the Montessori education experience, can you explain what makes it unique and how it differs from traditional school models?
It's very child-centered. Most other systems are teacher-centered.
Right. Making
Where-
things easier for the facilitator to get through lesson plans and deal
Yes.
with 30 kids at once.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. Or get through a curriculum.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And I guess that's one of the big differences is that we don't have a curriculum. We follow the child. And whatever the child is interested in, that's what we concentrate on at the beginning. Other systems tend to want to find children's weak spots. You know, if they're not very good with numbers, they'll concentrate on numbers. But the children are not good at numbers because they're not interested in them.
Right.
And it's a real turn-off for them.
Yeah, you end up feeling like a robot where they're constantly working on the most defective part of you instead
Right.
of nourishing your strengths. It's like
Yes.
you're constantly and that's sort of like how the testing is done in schools, right? Where it's more like you said, finding your weak points, which can be discouraging if
Yeah.
you're not someone who like enjoys that sort of constant challenge and the constant like measurement of
Yes.
here's how well you're not doing.
Yes. The public school system, no, I have my opinion about the public school system, but I would never denigrate teachers. I think they're doing a fantastic job given a very broken system.
Yeah.
But we don't have a curriculum, and we, as I said before, we follow the child. We find their strengths, and we concentrate on that, and that builds their confidence and their self-esteem, and it makes them more confident about trying something that they're a little less enthusiastic about. And we always take them at their own pace. Some children can go through an area of the classroom very quickly, but it's not speed, and we're not results oriented. We're process oriented. We feel if we teach the children the process in everything, then they can apply it, and they can take that and apply it to different situations. Whereas other systems are looking to get the right answer.
Right. And the Montessori system, is there a grade that it goes up to, or can you be within the system all the way through to the end of high school?
Yes, Montessori goes all the way up to high school.
Okay.
We don't have any high school in Guelph, but there are some really great high schools in Toronto. There's one in Dundas, and they're amazing.
So I could imagine, and I think I knew a little bit about some of that, the way that in the Montessori system you can kind of pick to a degree like what you'd like to focus on every day, and that if a student, if they get really into learning about fish or something like that, that they could just do these like deep dive explorations and spend the whole day, instead of saying like, your time learning about fish is just within this period and then the bell rings and you move on to something else. But do students ever face challenges when they're, for example, used to this like self-directed, self-motivated system, and then they go to, say, a high school that's not in that system, or if they choose to go to a college or university that is a lot more system, or, like the traditional methodology? Does that ever come into conflict with them?
I do get questions about that, especially when I do tours, because the children who graduate from us, they skip kindergarten and they go straight to grade 1 afterwards. So I've had parents ask me, well, where do I send them in grade 1? And I said, it's entirely up to you, but I always give myself as an example, because I was in the Montessori system for CASA, which is 2.5 to 6. And then I graduated and I went to public school in grade 1. And I don't recall ever having any big struggles with that transition. One thing I do recall, though, is I asked a lot of questions.
Right.
And some teachers liked that and some teachers did not like that.
Some teachers take it as a like that you're being like challenging their authority.
Yes.
I know for like myself, I'm a big question asker. It's no wonder I ended up doing a podcast like this, but and a lot of that's just seeking clarity and trying to understand something by needing to like understand the limits of it in your mind. So like I do a lot of that, where if I learn something, I start asking the question of like, okay, well, what happens if this thing happens to its maximum, or if this thing, like, I understand things by testing those limits, and a lot of kids probably fall into that.
For sure.
And that can be frustrating if the traditional system is very much, in some ways, teaching kids to be orderly, quiet, sit down and do a task, obedient.
Yeah. So I know when I graduated from Montessori, I was very confident. I could make friends easily, and it was, mind you, in public school, I didn't really enjoy public school, just because there's tests, and again, you focus on what you're not good at. So I remember growing up, especially like throughout high school, my mom would always tell me, just get through. It doesn't matter what your grade is, just pass, and then you're free, and then you can decide what you want to do with your life. So that was very reassuring when I was growing up.
So right now, if I understand it correctly, that Glynis, you're the principal of the school,
Yes.
and Rayna, you're are you key administrative?
Yeah, so I'm one of the office administrators slash supervisor. My mom doesn't come in very often anymore. She sort of, I always tell people she has one foot in and one foot out. Would you agree?
I've got 1.5 feet out,
Okay, 1.5 feet out.
and I've only got half a foot left in.
Yeah. So she doesn't come into the office very much anymore, but she still is involved in the school.
Gotcha. So how do your responsibilities both sort of intersect to shape the culture and daily rhythm of the school?
Well, we both had the same training, so we both think very much alike when it comes to applying the Montessori philosophy, and that removes a lot of obstacles. We most of our staff, about half our staff, is Montessori trained, and the other half is ECE, and it's sometimes a bit difficult for the ECEs to adapt to the Montessori philosophy. Is very hands-off with the teacher.
Right.
We don't interfere with the children much, apart from showing them new work or helping them if they absolutely need it.
Right.
We much prefer to let them try to find a solution to their problem rather than relying on adults. And each class is multi-age, so it's 3 to 6, 18 months to 3 years for the toddlers. And then when you go into elementary, it's 6 to 9, 9 to 12, and so on. It's all in 3-year increments. So the younger children, are the ones who need the most help. And we want to encourage them to seek that help from the older children in the class. And that gives the older children a chance to use the knowledge that they have, put it into practice. So we understand exactly how that works. But sometimes the untrained staff will want to jump in to help.
Right.
And it's just a human reaction. You see a child struggling, you automatically start to help. But that usually turns into doing it for them.
Right.
And we try to tell people, think of it as robbing the child of the opportunity to learn something new. It doesn't always go down well with parents if they don't understand why we're not helping them. But we try to explain at parent evenings our reasoning behind everything. There's a reason for everything that we do. And what might sometimes look like neglect is not, it's deliberate.
It sounds like you're really playing into the like the real definition of like facilitator in that sense, because you're there to facilitate the learning, oversee the learning, but you're guiding them along the path and giving them the tools they need, and maybe stepping in if they ask questions, if they really need the help, but also just letting the natural learning play out. And I think I can probably speak for a lot of listeners where like the most intense moments of learning come from the trial and error and come from the getting to do something, seeing how it didn't work, and then revising your plan and going at it again.
Yes.
And just being told, like, I know with math, I always struggled with math where it was like, I'm given a list of instructions, and maybe at the very beginning they kind of tell you, like, this is the theory, but you're also a little too young to really understand the math theory. So it ends up being a lot of memorization of the process. And then if you try to ask, like, but why am I doing this? And then the teacher ends up often just being like, because that's what we told you. And that's how you do it with the answer. And for me, like, that just doesn't click in terms of, okay, I can maybe memorize it for this test, but after the test, it's going to be gone because I didn't truly understand it.
Right.
I didn't have that comprehension of how all the parts were fitting together.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like, I think math is an area where it's easy to kind of break that down because it is so methodical how you go through it, but that's got to be true of everything, right? Of all the subjects.
Yes.
And then also when they do finally get it on their own, we call it the aha moment. And it's a wonderful feeling, even as adults, when you were like, oh, that's that's how it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
So we hold off intentionally so they can have those moments.
And the idea that the students are grouped in these like wider age bands sounds really interesting to me, because it is interesting in a typical schooling sense how you end up spending so much of your life only with kids in the exact same age, like, you know, born the same year, like within the same class. And that's a very alien, very not natural way of developing.
It's not. Yeah.
And like when you think of things, and I tend to, maybe to too much degree, but I tend to think in terms of like evolutionary psychology quite a bit, because I do think that our minds and culture and that are shaped through hundreds of thousands of years of evolution, where we were living in these tribal situations where we would have grown up with all the other young kids in a group. And in a situation like that, like, of course you wouldn't say like, okay, the 6-year-olds are here and the 7-year-olds are here. And like, none of that makes any sense.
Yeah.
You would end up in these age ranges where, like, sure, maybe kids at a certain age start wanting to do things, that activities that like the younger kids shouldn't or can't participate in. So there's going to be that natural variation of skill and ability. But then within the bands, it gives the opportunity for kids to step up and become leaders of their cohort. Like you were saying, that the older kids start teaching. And I think that's an incredible opportunity for them. And in like a traditional schooling sense, I don't know if kids get that opportunity outside of, like, I mean, maybe they do in sports, maybe they do in those sorts of situations where you can sort of step up. But the standard model is very much like everyone's on the same level of an individual, and everyone's like, the classroom is often oriented with like everyone's facing the teacher and everyone's taking in that instruction and that ability to learn from each other. Like, I imagine the system, the Montessori system, must really produce people who are flexible, like leaders, and people who aren't afraid to shake things up, and so to speak, like, and rethink how they apply to things or apply their skills and knowledge, because it's been second nature to them to do that growing up.
And that's the type of adults we want in our society. People who think for themselves, think outside of the box, and can lead a group of other people in a kind and respectful way. So,
and it's really what the modern economy or a modern system is really calling for, because of the days of graduating and then getting a job that you'll work that job forever. I think that's kind of long behind us. And, you know, maybe that model of, like, it's almost like our current model of teaching, traditional teaching, is still teaching, like, it's almost as if nothing's shifted, and they're still preparing the next generation to, like, become, you know, factory workers, kind of thing. Robots, right? Where it's oh, you're going to get a job. Your boss will tell you exactly what to do. Your job is to not ask questions and to just get it done and work efficiently.
Yeah.
But modern way of actually being prepared is to just have the flexibility and that dynamic processes in place where you can be comfortable with changing careers, with changing job titles, and changing, wearing multiple hats at the same company, and things
changing
like that.
Environments.
Yeah, exactly. and dealing with coworkers where, when you, in any traditional workplace, you're not going to have like an entire cohort around you where you're all the same age and you're all
Right.
at the same level. Like
Yeah.
you're going to have to deal with that just kind of chaotic system, right? Of different people, different ages, different perspectives, and just getting comfortable with that chaos.
Yeah.
Even
Yeah.
describing it as chaos isn't fair. It's just a natural system, right? Can you kind of walk us through what does a typical day look like for students at the Montessori School of Wellington?
Well, they come in, and when they arrive, we shake their hand. And this is something that we do when they come in and when they leave. Again, in North America, this is how we greet each other. So we practice that right when they come in. So we shake their hand and we give eye contact and we say good morning. And then they come in and they have their morning work cycle. So in Montessori, or Maria Montessori, she called it a work cycle because all the little activities on the shelf, we call it work for the children. So a work cycle can be a child moving through activities that they've been shown. If they want to work on a particular activity for the full morning, then we let them do that. As long as they're being respectful to the materials and they're focused, then that is what we want. We
Right.
want to build their focus and concentration. So if they want to do one thing for the full morning, that's fine. If they come in and they don't want to do anything at all, that's also fine, because although it may appear they're not doing anything, they're still listening, they're still observing and taking things in. So that's just as important in the classroom. They can have snack. So snack again is out all morning, and the children come and decide when they're going to come and eat, because not everybody's hungry at the same time. Again, we want them to listen to their bodies and understand when they're hungry. And so that's the morning. And then at the end of the morning, we come together, we have our morning conference. Conference is like circle time, but we call it conference. And again, they don't have to participate if they don't want to. Most of the time they want to, because we're singing songs, we're reading books, we're having grace and courtesy lessons. So this is another area of the classroom that isn't necessarily tangible, but it's like
We have to demonstrate it.
yeah, we have to demonstrate. So it's like, do you want to give an example of grace and courtesy?
Well, some young children are very physical. They haven't learned social graces or limits, and they may just grab something off another child if they want it, and that usually leaves the other child very upset, and they don't automatically know what to do in that situation. And in different cultures, the reaction is different. So we have to teach them what's the acceptable response in our culture. And so we do a lot of play acting. So the teacher would maybe take the child, the offender, and grab something out of his hand, and then she'll give it back, and then she'll say, "Excuse me, could I look at that? Could I look at that, please?" And we'll ask the children who are watching, "What do you think was better?" So they'll say, "Number two." So we don't get into long lectures with children who've maybe stretched the boundaries too much. We do it at the end and as a group, because it applies to everyone in the classroom. And so that's an example, I
Yeah.
guess.
Yeah, so when things arise and they don't know how to handle them, then we show them what to do next time it happens, because it's going to happen again. Another example is when children need help with something, then we teach them how to come and put their hand on our side. It's called the waiting hand, and we don't give them attention until we're finished with whoever we're working with at that moment. So they wait, and sometimes they might have to be waiting for 5 minutes, as long as they want to wait, or if they get eventually if they get bored and then go off and then seek help from a peer, that's fine too. But they come and put their hand on our side, and then once we can give them our full attention, then we speak to them. So that's another maybe grace and courtesy lesson we would practice at conference, just to help run the classroom smoothly.
Yeah. It sounds like, I mean, personally, as someone who, might have struggled with some, undiagnosed ADHD in school, the ability to, some might call it like a hyper focus or something, and really dive into something, like that sounds really fascinating to me, because like that's how I was outside of school. When I'd get into a project or get into a hobby or something like that, it would be like you'd have to tear me away from it because I would just want to get into it. And then in school, it would be like, I was just getting into this thing, and then suddenly, like, I have
There's
to
a
go
disruption.
to gym, or I have to go
Yeah.
do this, and that's not always. Yeah, that could be frustrating.
Yeah,
It's
definitely.
very frustrating, especially for a young child, because their concept of time is very different from ours. Like an hour ago is distant past as far as they're concerned, and tomorrow is forever away.
Yeah.
So we have to bear that in mind when we're asking them to do something. I've had discussions with other teachers. Some believe that you should only have to say something once, but I give it three times, and the first not command request is to get them ready,
Right.
make them aware of what's coming up. And the second one is a reminder. And the third one is, I'd like to see it done. And it's always worked quite well for me. So,
Yeah, it sounds like you must get a lot of kids who are actually like excited and interested in what they're working on, as opposed to the traditional school system where it's like maybe individual units of study can be interesting, but you're really dragged through it no matter what. Like ready, whether you're, I mean, that can be the problem in things like math, right? Is like I had friends that were really, really good at math, and they were so good that they found it like agonizing to sit there with the rest of the class
Exactly.
and do things at the same pace, because they
Yes.
didn't need to do that. They could have finished the whole textbook and been working on the next 3 years of
Yeah.
math, but being forced to move along at the same speed as everyone else kind of ruined the experience
Yeah.
for them. Yeah, versus just kind of getting to explore at your own pace. So how does this Montessori system, when it interfaces with traditional systems, like if kids want to go into a traditional high school, or I guess high school wouldn't be as integral, but if you're looking to move into like a university system, because then you kind of get into the whole admissions and grades and these categorization systems that we've developed. Is that ever a challenge for Montessori kids to perform to the same degree if they haven't really been studying, not studying, but they haven't been taught to the test or been, lectured for the test like other kids would be?
From my understanding of going and observing at different Montessori high schools, from what I've been told is, well, first and foremost, in Montessori, we set the bar higher for children because we know that they can reach that height. And so when I observed at this fabulous Montessori school in British Columbia, they were getting ready for their, admissions for university, basically. And so how the teacher described it was they had a project, they found a project that they wanted to work on, and how the teacher helped them get through those different stages was everything was evolved around that subject. So they needed to practice speaking in front of people. So then they learned everything about this subject, and then they were going to present it to the class. Then they needed to do, like, there were certain elements, but they made it possible through Montessori. And so I'm not sure what it's like at that level, because I didn't go to university. And so, yeah, I'm not sure what at that level what it would be like. But if I'm comparing it to when I went to grade 1, it was an easy transition for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. But again, all children are different. But what I tell parents when they graduate, when their children graduate from us, I tell them to have a good relationship with their teacher who they're moving on to. Let them know that they're coming from a Montessori school, because I've had children who have graduated from us, their parents come chat with me years later and say, oh, well, she was, quote, bored in grade 1. So the teacher noticed that and started giving her like grade 2 homework and more advanced things. And this particular little girl, she loved work. She came from a Montessori program, so she loved doing homework. She loved doing extra activities for the teachers. So it really, having that relationship with whoever they move on to is really important. Yeah.
Do you find in general that teachers who have only worked in the traditional system, are they receptive to the Montessori system? There must be a spectrum from, people who say like, oh, it's great. Every kid should get an experience like that, probably all the way to maybe the exact opposite where they say,
I don't know. I think there's a lot of assumptions.
right.
So that's why we always have our doors open. We want people to come and see what we offer. And I could talk about Montessori all day long. So I want people to come in and I want to answer any of their questions, because now the name Montessori is very trendy. It's all on social media. It's all on like Instagram, and there's a lot of misconceptions still about Montessori. So, I mean, if anybody has questions, feel free to come to the school, and I'm more than happy to answer any questions that you have.
What do you think the biggest misconceptions are? Is it like, I think, I don't know if you're familiar with the TV show Arrested Development, but there's a joke that the one character maybe went to like some private schools that were, for lack of better terms, maybe more like hippie kind of. And I think the joke in the show is that she got like an alligator in math, where like they didn't give out letter grades or numbers. It was like assigning like animals as a thing. And it's very much just a joke at like, oh, like different schooling systems can have, I don't want to use the word wacky, but just things that from the outside perspective be like, oh, what's actually going on there? That seems kind of silly.
Yeah.
And again, not being a parent, not being enmeshed in the school system in any way, is that sort of where people come from, where they think like, oh, Montessori, like maybe it's well intentioned, but their kids aren't actually getting ready for the real world, or like maybe they thrive in that system, but they're going to not thrive in a workplace, or is that a little bit of what people think? Or
we get from each spectrum. So I've heard the word cult before. I've heard that, oh, it must be a free-for-all because they have free choice.
Right.
I've heard that it's too strict.
It's not strict enough.
It's not strict enough.
That's an interesting either side of the coin.
Yeah, I know. It's the two polar opposites. So, yeah, it's tricky. It's tricky because there's a lot of false information out there.
Yeah.
So I recommend going to, if whoever's listening, to go to and observe in an accredited Montessori school. Because unfortunately, the name Montessori isn't trademarked. And so lots of people like to put Montessori in their name, but may not necessarily be following the Montessori philosophy. So always look for a school that's accredited by Montessori Canada. They used to be called CCMA, but they've sort of rebranded to make it easier to say, I think, Montessori Canada. And we just happen to be the only fully accredited Montessori school in Guelph.
One of you referenced, because I was going to ask where the name Montessori came from, and one of you referenced someone's name that I'm guessing
Maria Montessori.
Maria Montessori.
Yes.
Was she like? Where did she develop the like? I was going to ask if she was Canadian, but is she Canadian, or was
No.
she? Did it come out of America?
No, she's Italian. She was
Oh,
Italian.
okay, that makes sense. Montessori.
Yeah.
Yeah. She actually trained to be a doctor, a medical doctor, but there were no female medical doctors in Italy at the time. So she was banned from doing certain studies. Like the students were given access to the morgue at the university, and they would go and examine cadavers, and she wasn't allowed to do this. She had to go like in the early hours of the morning and do it alone, because the men were shocked and horrified.
Interesting how systems of oppression can unlock something in people's minds who go through them, because I mean, it's almost like when people say like the what did they say, the mother of invention is necessity. Like, she went through that system that was sexist against her. She had these limitations placed on her, and because of that, she had to think outside the box to get through her education. And it's not surprising that that mentality led her to develop a system where people, through the like framework of that system, could forge their own education pathways, as she was forced to. If
Yes.
that makes any sense. Like,
Yes.
she had obviously had the spirit of resilience to overcome some of that, and then that led her to say like, okay, not everyone's going to have that, like, go in the middle of the
Yeah.
night to get their studies done, but clearly enabling education through any means necessary, sort of thing, and to like meet people where they're at was important to her. So the Montessori education, it seems like, really emphasizes independence and hands-on learning. How do you see those values impacting students, not just academically, but outside of the school system as citizens of the wider, Guelph-Wellington community?
Well, it makes people less dependent on the approval of others. We deliberately don't overpraise the children. We have a lot of children who come and they scribble something on a piece of paper and bring it to you. Look what I did. And we put it back to the child and we say, well, what do you think of it?
It's just a piece of paper.
I don't want to hear you have it. But it discourages that kind of dependence on other people's approval.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure you know adults who can't take a step forward without the approval of at least somebody else.
And I've seen how that can really backfire for people when especially when they're early in their career. And it can be used maliciously by like bosses and managers who sort of like, oh, this person's an overachiever. And whether the boss or manager like is fully doing it consciously or just unconsciously, but there's a sense of like, oh, I can exploit this person because I can keep them on a treadmill of seeking my approval, and they're just going to burn themselves out trying to get there. Versus like, I always to sing the praises of my wife on this podcast, but I find she is very self-assured, and she does not care what other people think about her in a way where I always want to like take some of that and like, how can I incorporate this into my life? Because it's so freeing seeing
Yes.
someone who can just move through the world and
Very
say like,
freeing.
Yeah.
Yes.
you know, whether you like it or not, like her opinion is what matters most to her, and her own approval of what she's doing and her sense of like morally right or wrong is
Yes.
what matters to her. And that's something really to respect, because if you go through the schooling system where you're always just seeking the approval of your teacher, then that's really tough to become a leader unto yourself. Like,
Yes.
and you're always going to be seeking that approval, and also wary of the disapproval is
Right.
maybe
Right.
the unspoken part, is like, oh, I'm not going to say anything because what if I say the wrong thing?
Exactly.
I'm not going to
Afraid to fail.
try to do something.
Yeah.
I just earlier today was talking to Nathan from Guelph Family Martial Arts, and I was talking to him about that idea, that a little bit of a tangent, but I am very glad that I grew up pre-social media. Social media kind of became big right near the end of high school, early university for me, because when I grew up, you weren't afraid that everything you say or do could be captured by a smartphone in someone's hand, and that your stupid thing you said or stupid thing you did was
Yeah.
going to live on forever for you. And I can't help but think that like younger kids today might be living in a world where they're constantly having to perform. Like they're constantly moving through the world
Yeah.
like they're celebrities on the red carpet, where paparazzi are capturing
Yeah.
them from every angle, and that has to just lead to like a paralyzation,
Yeah.
right?
It's a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we in the classroom we try to have absolutely no technology in the classroom, and I've had conversations in the past with some adults about it, but try to not give them access at home.
Yeah.
It's just a Band-Aid. It's just something to keep them quiet. But I could go on about the technology. Like everything is instant in technology.
Yeah.
Like you push a button and it's at your door the next day, or you say, "Hey Google, what is this?"
Yeah.
So children don't have to think anymore, and they don't have to wait for anything.
They don't have to be bored ever.
Exactly, yes. And through boredom comes creativity. Oh my goodness, my phone just
Hey, you said the magic
reacted.
words.
I
It's
did.
just always listening, right?
Yeah,
But,
exactly. My phone just responded. So in the classroom, like the materials that we have, all the work, nothing does anything. Like nothing lights up, nothing
Speaks to them.
speaks to them. They have to manipulate it in order for it to do something. So that's what I love about Montessori. I
Yes.
mean, Montessori, the philosophy started over 100 years ago. And there's been a lot of talks in the Montessori community, like how do we sort of get with the times?
yeah.
But at this age group, up until 6 years of age, it's really important to just avoid technology as much as possible.
Yeah.
It's so hard though, because it's our whole
We're
world.
competing with it.
Yeah.
You know, we have to. I read that in education there has to be a certain amount of danger to keep a child's attention. Something that gets the adrenaline flowing. Like when we take them out for walks, they want to climb a tree, they can climb a tree.
Right.
We'll
Because
be there
real life doesn't have guardrails in
Right.
that way.
Right. Yes.
Risky
And
play.
sometimes you learn a little bit by, I climbed a bit too high,
Yeah.
and when I fell, it hurt a little bit.
Yes.
And kids
Yeah.
are bouncy for the most part, so
Yeah. But when Maria Montessori said that her form of education was preparing children for life and not for school. And that's so true. Like we're trying to teach them core values, and core values don't really change with technology.
Right.
You're honest or you're dishonest. You're trustworthy or you're untrustworthy. You keep your word or you don't keep your word. And these are the values that matter in life and that get you through life, not your marks, not your grades,
Yeah.
and not other people's opinions of you, because marking and grading children is just somebody's opinion.
Yeah. It becomes the like absolute law of the classroom, but you're right, it's fairly subjective. Tests can be yeah, it's kind of arbitrary. And speaking to, like we said before, about people who you meet who have that desire to constantly perform for others, I think that can be a really difficult part of the traditional school system, is that it's like kids are always on this treadmill where it's like, oh, like get ready for the midterm, then get ready for the big test, and then the big assignment, and then they go through that, and then sometimes they do post-secondary where it's the same thing, where they're constantly like they're always preparing for the future thing.
Yeah.
And then they graduate and they get a job, and sometimes the job puts them in that same treadmill where they're like, okay, you're a junior whatever now, and then you work this, and then you'll get a raise
climb the
every
ladder.
exactly you'll
Yeah.
but then at some point they maybe turn around and realize, like, wait a second, there's no end goal to this. There's no finish line where then someone comes out and gives them a ribbon and says, you're done.
Participation award.
Exactly. Like life is just one long series of days that you're moving through. And I think that can be really tricky for some people to reconcile with constantly feeling like they were in this race, and now they can kind of just feel like, well, what's my purpose then? Like, why am I moving through the world? Versus if the Montessori system, the purpose of every day is up to you to some degree, which is how real life is, right? Like what you want to accomplish at your personal life or in your career. It ends up being very self-directed.
Yeah.
So.
And through Montessori, we're also teaching them how to self-regulate and how to cope when things don't go their way.
Right. Which is partially that technology thing, because it's so easy to, I mean, we kind of brought this up before, but the idea of never being bored. Like when I was a kid, those times of boredom were what would spark me to like do something interesting, to create something new, to want to go in a different direction.
Exactly.
And I can feel as an adult where when I hit a little bit of that boredom, it's so easy to like pull out my phone, to fall into a technology, or just like to soothe, like self-soothe myself through these little things that give these little hits of dopamine. And none of them are nearly as rewarding as like doing something challenging, but it sort of quiets that little bit of boredom and then satiates you, but doesn't actually fill you up in the same way as true boredom does, where true boredom can be the trigger to doing something neat and interesting. I'm glad that I had a childhood that was, I don't want to say technology free. I grew up with like video games in the house since I was born, but TV in my bedroom. Like I had all this technology and all these things, and I'm grateful for those to some degree, but I'm also glad that I didn't have a smartphone or an iPad, because I think it'll be an interesting, I mean, we're already kind of seeing this play out, where there are some philosophies where they think people should embrace technology and all, like maybe that's kind of like some people may call it like a transhumanism sort of thing, meaning like people who believe that the smartphone is a natural extension of our mind to some degree, and like I think there's something interesting to be said there, but it's also a real change. And as I said before, we have hundreds of thousands of years of natural evolution that we still have the minds of those same, like we are the unchanged from, natural humans in that way, like physiologically speaking. And I think our minds still kind of yearn for that natural environment. And there's a lot of the problems of everyday life might be maybe where we stray from those natural conditions or those natural ways of being. We did not have iPads in the wilderness.
We had to wait for the shows to come on and record them. But we're not hating completely on technology.
Right.
Technology is an amazing tool, but we shouldn't be relying on it.
Yeah.
And I was saying to a staff member just this week when Bell went out, and we couldn't run our business. Like the phone didn't work and the internet didn't work. And then it all came back on, and it was just like a nice reminder, like we can't always rely on technology.
Yeah.
We got to use our noggins sometime.
Yeah.
But YouTube, like you can learn anything on YouTube now. Who needs school? You can just learn a subject on YouTube now. And I think a lot of people are seeing that difference these days, that not too many people are really going into university or college because those skills can learn elsewhere.
And also, like, I mean, above and beyond just YouTube, but things like the AI tools,
for sure.
where, I've just gotten glimpses of this, of like educators on like my TikTok feed who are talking about young students who don't see the value of, what's the point of me doing an essay on myself? I can just ask for that. I can have that be generated automatically for me. And I think that's a scary place to be in, because it's a little bit of like, well, what's the point of anything then?
Exactly.
Like, why? Yeah. And I guess that's a bigger question than here, but I do wonder, because in some ways I am a proponent of the benefits of technology, maybe less so than I was in my early 20s, where I was more like optimistic of like, oh, this tech's just going to be great. And now that I'm in my 30s and I'm like, okay, wait, like maybe social media is a negative, maybe like, and a lot of people have dealt with that as a society, right? Where if you look at the way people thought we would use the internet in the 80s or the 90s, it was just pure like, oh, it's just going to connect us and it's going to make the world one happy family. And it's like, oh, but they didn't understand, like they couldn't have comprehended the negative externalities that would use this technology to divide us more than it connects us. But I have thought a little bit about like, if we're comparing a traditional schooling system with like one teacher who has to try to somehow cater to everyone and teach to their method, like I do envision a world where that system is going to be augmented with like AI facilitators that can help every individual child, where when they're trying to do, instead of saying like, okay, everyone do these exact same 30 math questions, it might dynamically change for each student, where it can say like, oh, I see where you screwed up on that last question, so let's give you another one that rearranges it and like challenges you in that same way. And I can see how that could be useful, but I think again that's still a bit of a pipe dream, and there's a bit of a, in between here and there, like, oh, magically the tools will get so much better and they won't have any problems and they won't have any of those challenges. So I guess all that to say, I can respect a system that says there's plenty of time in these kids' lives for them to get into technology, to use technology, and school doesn't have to be that in that way, right?
Yeah.
And even if it's like technology, that doesn't mean that you can't be, like, I'm sure there's tech involved in, like, maybe not when they're 1 or 2, but like as they get older in the Montessori system, right? Like there's ways to make use of technology still.
Right, yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about the role, we've kind of touched upon it already, but the role that parents and families play in the school community? Does it differ from traditional schooling systems?
We try to get the parents involved as much as possible.
Yes.
Because when the children, at the beginning of their day, the parents drop off at the front door. They don't come in because this is the child's space. So we have an app that we have, which is amazing. It's tailored to Montessori schools. So we post pictures of the children and all the work that they've been shown. It's not the same though. So we have parent observations so that they can sign up and they can come in and sit in a morning work cycle and observe a morning class. We also invite parents to come and speak about their cultures. One year we had a family come in and talk about, oh my goodness, what's that Jewish holiday?
Hanukkah?
Hanukkah. Yes, Hanukkah. And Diwali, and like we want to learn about the different cultures of the families. And we have parent nights as well. So just to bridge that gap
Yeah.
of like we throw a lot of language at them that they probably don't know what the decanomial square is. So we want to invite them in, show them what the decanomial square is, have them manipulate it, and just to have that involvement.
What's the how do you describe it? The observation?
Yes, parent observation.
Parent observation. What's that process normally like? Because that must be really interesting to see parents.
It is. It's hard for them to sit back and be a
Right.
fly on the wall. But
Is that where they get into the like, oh, my kid's struggling with this thing? Like, I want to help them. I want to do this. Like, why
yes.
isn't someone helping
Yes.
them?
Yes. So we have a sheet that the parents read beforehand, explaining the different areas that they'll see in the room, asking them to be a fly on the wall. We know it's hard, but the only way for them to get a proper understanding is to be as hands-off as possible. And again, we always warn parents, your child, they don't normally see you in the classroom, so please don't expect them. Like they might just want to be with you the whole time, or
Right.
they might, who knows how they will act. But we have them all throughout the year so they can see them at different times of the year.
So you don't
And-
make them stand behind like a one-way mirror where the kids
No.
can't see them? Or...
Well, we actually tried.
Yes.
So in our new build, we have these doors with windows in them, and I tried to get the builders to put in the one-way window, but I don't think it works because we have so much natural light.
Right.
So it's still very foggy. So we still have them come into the classroom. We have an observation chair in there anyway, because part of Montessori is observation. A huge chunk of it is observation. So even I get the staff members to try to do at least 20 minutes a week, preferably more, but to completely take themselves away from the classroom, sit in it, and just observe. Because that's how Maria Montessori created this entire philosophy, was purely through observations. So observation is a huge part at our school.
And is that the opportunity for them to, like, in a really, like, take yourself outside of the environment and just try to get a sense of the individual students, where they're at, like patterns maybe that you recognize, and just start to understand them as like human beings, so that you can
Yeah.
cater to their strengths and their weaknesses, and just like maybe what they would need to succeed.
Yes. So because so much goes on in the classroom during a morning work cycle, so many things that you might not necessarily see. So even just observing a group of children working together,
Right.
there's so many, like you hear the conversations they're having, or how you see how they're handling the materials. Maybe you need to go back and represent something to a child if they're not doing it in, I don't know,
A
a respectful way. Yeah. So I really enjoyed observing when I was teaching. I made it a point to observe again once a week, preferably more. But because I just learned so much about the children when I step back.
Yeah. So I know we talked a bit about COVID and its the impact that it had on our education system and the sort of ripples that are still reverberating through our society as like because of that. How are you seeing that? Like, do you still feel like we're in a post-COVID world in terms of the cohort of kids coming up? Was it just one, like, because I certainly felt like I'm very glad that none of my schooling was impacted by it, because I feel
know.
like there was no easy time, right?
No.
Like if you were nearing the end of your school system, then like maybe it really impacted your, say, 11th and 12th years of high school, and then those are the years where you really kind of step up in maturity and like you get ready to move on whatever you're going to do. And yeah, I just feel really a lot of empathy for the people who went through that, both the students and the parents.
Oh, for sure.
Who, you know, were then forced to work a job remotely and keep an eye on their kid. And like it's no wonder where a lot of screen time probably went up during those years. But what are your thoughts as educators that are dealing with kids?
We definitely saw an impact when we all came back. And even a few years after that, there was a difference in the children.
Like in maturity level and just in, because
social.
they were robbed. That's the thing, right? They were robbed of so many
Exactly.
opportunities to interact with other kids.
Exactly. So social skills were down, and also speech. That was another interesting thing that we found, that we had a lot more children who needed help with speech. It may be because there was an iPad or a TV, and there's no communication happening.
Yeah.
So what I always
And
tell
when they were talking to people outside, out of the
Exactly.
world, people were wearing masks, and
Yes,
it was
exactly.
you know,
So you couldn't see facial expressions anymore. So I always tell parents, the prime time to connect with your child is when you're eating. Is at dinner time or breakfast or any of those times, because that's when everybody comes together and you can talk about your day. And that's a great time to, well, table manners is one, and also conversation skills. So you look at somebody when you speak to them, one person speaks at a time, and we sort of on a little bit of a side point, but a lot of parents come at the end of the day and they're like, "Oh, what did you do today?" And children, there's like my mom said, that's so far in the past.
yeah.
They don't care about what they did that day. They just, now you're here and this is the time. So I say to parents, this is a great time not to question them what they did today, but you can start talking about what you did today.
Yeah.
Oh, today I was at the grocery store and this happened and this happened. And then children are more likely to chime in and say, oh yeah, when I was doing this happened. So you can find out a lot more about a child, about your child during those times when you come together. So I always stress to parents to have them sit at the table with you. No TV on, no iPad at the table. Same thing goes for the adults. No phone, and just have that time as a family. And it's so crucial.
It's a real skill being a good conversationalist. And it takes years of training, you know. But if it's not instilled in children right from the start, they can't catch up.
Yeah.
They're more likely to be introverted and unsure of themselves when talking to other people, and
They miss the social cues.
pardon?
They miss the social cues.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And just trying to understand other people, you know, because a young child, they still don't have an awareness of the impact that they have on their environment, because they see themselves as the center of their environment.
Yeah. Everything else is
Yeah.
orbiting around
Yes,
them.
yes. And that's perfectly natural. But then as they get experience, they're exposed to other situations, other children, people, they gradually gather an awareness of the impact of their behaviour on
Right.
the world, and ways to, I want to say manipulate, but that's a bit harsh. The ways to handle people, you know, learning what's acceptable and what's not acceptable, and learning that people will respond to a gentle attitude more than an
Demanding.
overbearing attitude. Pardon?
Right.
Rather than demanding.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And that's a skill that's so important, even more important nowadays, because we have access to facts through the internet.
Yeah.
We can Google anything we want to know, but we don't learn how to deal with people on the internet.
Yeah.
And that takes a lot of practice and a lot of interaction with other people. And I think during COVID, obviously their worlds got much smaller, and they were dealing with people that they were very familiar with,
Yeah.
you know, the close family.
Siblings or parents,
Yeah.
or
Yes.
maybe cousins if they're lucky.
Yes.
And
And they weren't being exposed to social situations. You know, eating out wasn't as common, and social events weren't as common. So they suffered from that.
And there's so many times in life where we grow when we're in situations that are uncomfortable, and that, like, with the modern world, we can avoid those situations so easily. You know, we talk about using our technology to escape boredom, but it's not just boredom that we escape. It's a little bit of discomfort. It's a little bit of sadness, a little bit of introspection. Like, you know, our generation of millennials are famous for avoiding phone calls and
Yes.
not wanting to, like, oh, if I have to call something to book
Yeah.
a service, we'll probably avoid it because we can do it online. But all of that is seeking the comfortable option, because calling someone, oh, what if it's a little bit awkward? What if it's a
Yeah.
little bit, and it's, I don't know if that's healthy for us for building resilience, because life is made up of uncomfortable moments.
Yes.
And a lot of times, to build something as an adult, to do something interesting, you're going to have to talk to people you disagree with. You're going to have to put yourself out there in uncomfortable situations, and you have to cultivate that desire to be okay with a little bit of that
Yes.
discomfort,
Yes.
and to almost be excited by that discomfort. I know I've had people, or I forget who described it this way, but basically that, like, anxiety and excitement can feel very similar. Like, if you think about the flutter in your stomach
Yeah.
before you do something, a lot of that can be all about just how you're framing it in your mind, where on the one hand you could look at it as like, oh, I'm feeling this fluttering, and it's because I'm nervous and I'm not going to do well and I hate this experience. But then other people could have that exact same physical sensation, and to them they're, okay, I'm a little bit nervous because it's I want to do well and I'm excited
Yeah.
to do well, and I'm a little bit nervous because I don't know what's going to happen, but then that brings opportunity.
Yeah.
And some people are empowered by that excitement, and some people it kind of just makes them shut down to some
Yes.
degree. So I could see how the Montessori system is, like, playing into that, like playing into that comfort in the discomfort, because that's where we grow.
Yes.
Exactly. Yeah.
Looking ahead, what's your vision for the future of Montessori School of Wellington? Do you have any new programs, expansions, or dreams that you're working on?
Lots of dreams.
Yeah.
I mean, we fulfilled our main dream of having our own building. That was a huge
Yes.
accomplishment.
Yes.
And we expanded to have toddlers. I don't know.
But we're already outgrowing it,
Yeah.
the building.
Yeah.
And
We've only been there for 4 years.
I know.
Do you get the opportunity to connect with the leaders at other Montessori
Yes.
locations?
Oh, yes.
Yes.
When you have those sorts of conversations, I'm wondering, is there anything that kind of comes to the forefront that makes you think that, like, oh, Guelph is a unique, special place to be running a school like this in terms of like the attitude of the wider Guelph community and how it interfaces with the Montessori system? Or is that just sort of wishful thinking on my part that Guelph's special? Or is it like you hear similar things from other people? Or
I grew up in Guelph. I was born here. I grew up here. I never left. I love Guelph, and I love like the community base of Guelph. And even Guelph is expanding every single day. But I don't know. What do you think?
I like the small town feel of
Yeah.
Guelph. I think it's interesting how there's two main communities. I think there's the downtown community, and then there's the south side community.
Yeah.
The south side is very much a bedroom community. They're commuters, and don't really. Well, they do socialise, but
Yeah.
it's
it's
not
different like priorities that bring
Yeah,
people to the
definitely.
South End in some ways,
Yeah.
right? I mean, in some ways
Yes.
it's just the economics of,
and
that,
convenience. It's
yeah.
close to the 401.
yeah.
But I find there's more of a community feel downtown, and I think the university adds to that too.
Right.
Yeah.
I do like obviously a lot of the people I've talked to in this podcast have been focused in the downtown area, but I don't want to be like a downtown elitist when it comes to Guelph. Like I think
Yeah.
it's easy for people to sort of hate on the sprawl of the South Side, or I mean, I've even expressed this opinion myself where it can feel like the South Side of Guelph doesn't feel as much like
Yeah.
Guelph as the rest of it, where it can
It feels like Mississauga.
yeah, and some of
Yeah.
that's just like, oh, similar Ontario sprawling developments at the same time. But the south side of Guelph is still a lot closer to the core of Guelph than it is to the GTA.
Yeah.
And I hope that as the city continues to grow, we can strengthen
Yeah.
the unity between them.
And that was one thing that we were, it was on our mind when we moved, because we had been downtown for 25 years. So we have mature trees and different architectural buildings. And then we moved to the south end. And in our area, we were like the first, we're in a plaza now.
Right.
So it's us, and then there were 2 vacant spots. And there's a lot of similar looking buildings and baby trees, and everything is new. So that was something that we were sort of hoping that we could build upon. And I'm actually really happy now, like, because more has come up around us. One of the things we were worried about was lack of natural space. But thankfully we found Westminster Woods, and there's a beautiful trail there with ponds and whatnot. So, and the main reason that we moved to the South End is because there were no Montessori schools in the South End.
Right.
So I'm definitely more happy now that we've established our space there, and we have amazing families that are just walking distance away from us, and
Yeah.
it feels like that community again that we had when we were downtown.
Yes.
Like parents would just walk over and
And there's
stop
a lot more
by.
diversity.
Yes.
in the
Oh, for
south
sure.
side.
Yeah.
Yeah. That is very true, that there's the diversity in the city isn't equally spread across. Like there's neighborhoods, and I know you said about like the sameness of sometimes the south
Yeah.
side, and I think it's important, like I'm saying this to myself
Yeah.
too, to remind ourselves that like the diversity of the downtown is because of its age.
Yeah.
And sometimes I'm thinking of this because outside our window here, there's a couple buildings that are all in a row,
Yeah.
and they all look very different now because they've had 100 years of like different owners doing minor changes and
Evolving.
different.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then over time, they do truly evolve into looking like different buildings. But if you really look at them, you can see how, when they put these buildings up, it was like 4 of the exact same house in a
Yeah,
row.
that's true.
And it's only through 100 years of slow changes that they
Yeah.
will, and that will be true of the South End as well, where it will evolve and it will change.
Yeah.
But so if listeners want to learn more, either if they have kids or they might have kids in the future or something like that, where would you direct people to learn more about your school?
Well, I say to come in
Yeah, you think
and talk
that's-
to us is number one. For a long time, we didn't have any advertising, and it was all just word of mouth. Now we have, because we've been running for so long, now we have children that my mom taught. Now we have their children here and their grandchildren. So
Do you find that it's a pretty common story of Montessori parents want their kids in the same system
yes.
because they
Yeah.
really believe in
Yes.
it?
yeah,
Yeah.
They probably take those sort of the lessons and philosophy into their home life too,
exactly.
right?
They
yes.
do.
Yeah.
Yes. And they see how their children have flourished. And, they want the same thing for them.
Yeah.
But,
So, but if you can't make it in, then we have a website,
yes.
www.montessori-school.ca. And we also have an Instagram. It's at Montessori of Wellington 1996. But the number one thing is to come see us.
Yeah.
Yes.
And see it. And like, I give tours Monday through Thursday. So you can just call us and we can set up a tour, and you can come see the classrooms themselves.
Most parents are blown away when they observe a classroom. They can't believe how quiet and focused the children are. And they'll say, well, it's amazing, it's fabulous, but my child would never do that.
Right.
But I'd say, well, the parents of almost all of these children said the same thing.
Yeah. These aren't special.
Yeah.
I mean, every kid is special, but these aren't uniquely special children. They're
Right.
just flourishing in an environment, and
Yes.
it's the environment that's shaping the behavior,
Yes,
not the.
exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's usually very impressive. But we found that a parent will come in and observe, and then the teacher will come into the office and she'll say, "Oh, that was terrible. That was awful. The children were so loud and behaved so
Yeah.
badly."
And it's
And the
messy.
parents are going, "That's amazing. How do you do it? What do you do? What's your secret?"
I guess
So
it's-
clean and organized. And
Yes.
the staff
Yeah.
are like, oh my gosh, it's a mess.
It's a proof that like we all get used to the environment that we're in,
Yeah.
right? So
Right.
your teachers don't necessarily always get to see the other side of the
Yeah.
coin and see
Yes.
what other classrooms look like, and
Yes.
or even if they have a quiet, well-behaved classroom, is it achieved through fear or discipline or things like that, which is very different than kids self-directed.
Yeah. And they're all doing what they want to do.
Yeah.
That's why
They've
it's so
chosen
quiet.
what they're doing.
They're not forced to do anything. So
There's got to be some stats. Well, I should ask, are there stats that show that like Montessori kids are more likely to be like own their own business?
successful, happy.
Yeah, or
Yes.
like whatever that means to them. But you would think that they would be a little bit unwilling to just take like a job where they have to do what they're told exactly as they're
Yes.
told it. And they might be, a little bit more of like, no, I'm going to do something my way.
Right. Well, there's lots of big names who
Yeah.
had Montessori education, like Jeff Bezos and Sergey Brin, and his partner, I can't remember his name, that own Amazon.
That's interesting. So there's definitely, yeah, just
We tell parents that we can't guarantee that their child will be a leader, but we can pretty well guarantee they won't be a follower.
I mean, that's an interesting point that not all, sometimes we see like leadership as the ultimate goal, but you know, some people thrive in being like a specific kind of doer on a team,
Yes.
or which is kind of an issue with the corporate world where, you know, if you're the best salesperson on the sales team, they make you the sales manager when you might not be the best people manager.
Yeah,
The
exactly.
worst salesperson on the team might be the best manager of people,
Yes.
but they get fired. And sometimes that can lead to, I think it's called the Peter Principle or something, where basically it's the idea that in a corporate world, people rise to their level of failure, meaning like success in one role means that they get promoted, and then that process happens until they get to a point where they're not successful and they can't get promoted, so they end up stalling out in a position that they are not thriving in.
Yes.
And then that's kind of their reward for a long career of doing well, is being stuck
Yeah.
in a position that they don't love and that they're not good at, as opposed to rewarding people for what they're good at. But, well, thank you so much for both joining me
Thank you for
today
having
on the
us.
podcast.
Thank
This was
you.
a really interesting conversation. Like I said, I don't have kids yet, but it's certainly given me a lot to think about, and I'm
Yeah.
sure that's true of some of our listeners too. So
Good.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank
We're
you.
always happy to spread the word.
Yeah.
Awesome. And if any of our listeners want to visit your social media or your website, there'll be links in the show notes. So thanks so much. And yeah, best of luck with all the kids that I'm sure you'll inspire and continue to connect with.
Okay.
Great. Thank
Thank you
you.
very much.
Thanks for listening to Growing Guelph. I've been your host, Jordan Sloggett. Be sure to subscribe to us on social media, on your favorite podcast app, and if you have a recommendation for a future guest you'd like me to speak to, you can reach out to me at growingguelph@gmail.com.